She found out on a Friday. Not from him. He did not have the decency to tell her himself. She found out the way women have been finding out since the beginning of time. From another woman's mouth. At the market. At the fabric stall where she had been buying material every month for 7 years to sew uniforms for the school where she worked. A woman she barely knew. Someone she had greeted maybe 4 times. This woman looked at her with the careful eyes of someone deciding whether to speak. And then she spoke. She said, "Nkechi, I hear congratulations is in order for your husband." Nkechi said, "What do you mean?" The woman said, "The naming ceremony. For the new baby." Nkechi stood very still. She said, "What new baby?" The woman's face changed. Slowly. The way faces change when someone realizes they have walked into a room they were not supposed to enter. She said, "I." Nkechi said, "Whose baby?" The woman said nothing. She did not need to say anything. Because the nothing said everything. The nothing said, "The baby belongs to the man who comes home to you every night." The nothing said, "The naming ceremony happened 3 weeks ago." The nothing said, "Everyone knew except you." Everyone. Except you. Nkechi stood at the fabric stall. She did not move. She did not cry. She did not fall. She had given up a scholarship to stay by this man's side. She had given up her own career ambitions to manage his. She had packed and unpacked the same compound 4 times as his work required them to move. She had eaten the small meals in the hard years without complaining. She had pushed and prayed and planned and sacrificed for 10 years without a single day of asking, "What about me?" And he had given her nothing for all of that. Nothing except a lie. A beautiful, complete, daily, systematic lie. For however long this baby had been alive, he had been lying. She stood at the fabric stall. She set down the material she was holding. She thanked the woman. She walked out of the market. She went home. She sat in the house they lived in. The house that her money had helped to furnish. The house that her sacrifice had helped to make possible. She sat. And she waited for him to come home. Because she had one question. Just one. And she was going to ask it looking directly at his face. If that opening just made your chest tight in a way you cannot explain, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel because we carry the full story here. Not the polished version. Not the one where the pain is skipped. The full one. The one that hurts before it heals. Subscribe right now and drop in the comments where you are watching from. Every city. Every country. Every woman who has ever given everything and been given nothing back. We want to know you are here. Drop your location. And now let us go back to the beginning of this story. Because this story does not start with a betrayal. It starts with a meeting. It starts with 2 young people in a university in Enugu. And it starts with hope. The kind of hope that is so bright and so certain that it looks, from a distance, exactly like love. Nkechi Asika was from a small town in Anambra called Agbaru. The daughter of a fisherman and a petty trader. One of 6 children. The 4th. Not the first who needed to be established. Not the last who needed to be pampered. The middle. The one who learned early that the middle does not get extra attention. The middle must simply get on with things. And getting on with things was something Nkechi understood deeply. She was not built for complaining. She was built for doing. From the time she was 10, she helped her mother sort and sell dried fish at the local market. She woke early. She worked without being asked twice. She did what needed doing. She also read. Everything she could find. Borrowed books. Library books. Her older siblings' old textbooks. She read with a hunger that her teachers noticed. One of them, a woman named Madam Ehejerika, told her mother, "Your daughter has a mind that will take her somewhere if you give it the chance." Her mother gave it the chance. She scraped and organized and borrowed and prayed. And Nkechi went to secondary school, and then, against odds that a less determined person would have accepted as final, she got into the University of Nigeria Enugu campus on a partial scholarship to study economics. The scholarship was partial. The family made up the difference. She arrived in Enugu with a small box of belongings and the precise awareness that she was there on borrowed resources and wasted time was not something she could afford. She threw herself into the work. She was not a social person, not shy, just focused. She had a purpose, and the purpose did not leave much room for anything else. Until her second year, when she met Tobechukwu. Tobechukwu Duru. Everyone called him Tobe. He was from Owerri. Third year, business administration. He was not the kind of man who stood out in a crowd. Not immediately. He was not the most handsome, not the loudest, not the most dramatic. But there was something about him. A quality. The quality of someone who had decided something, who had looked at the world and chosen a position in it, and was moving toward that position with the steady certainty of someone who is not in a hurry because they know they will arrive. He had plans. Specific, detailed, organized plans. He talked about them with the easy confidence of someone who had thought everything through. A business. His own. Not working for another man. His own brand. His own company. The distribution business. He had studied the gap in logistics between producers and retailers in the Southeast. He had mapped the opportunity. He had the outline of the thing. He just needed two more things. Capital. And someone who believed in it with him. He met Nkechi at a departmental lecture. An open lecture that both their departments attended. They ended up seated near each other. He asked her a question about the lecture content. She answered it more thoroughly than he expected. He looked at her. He said, "Your economics?" She said, "Yes." He said, "I need someone like you to argue with." She said, "I don't argue. I analyze." He said, "Even better." They became study partners first, which was the honest version of becoming friends, which became the honest version of becoming something more. He liked her precision, the way she dismantled the problem, the way she never said something she had not thought through, the way she pushed back on his plans, not to discourage, but to pressure test. She liked his vision, the fact that it was specific, that he had done the research, that he was not simply dreaming but planning. She also liked, though she did not say it initially, that he listened to her. Not performance listening, real listening. The kind where he took what she said and actually incorporated it into his thinking. That was rare. In her experience, in her family, in her world. A man who listened, who adjusted, who did not require the last word. She found it disarming. By their third year together, his final year, her second to last, they were inseparable in the way that the people around them described as beautiful. They were beautiful together, in the specific way of two people who make each other better, who sharpen each other, who fill the gaps the other person has. He brought the vision. She brought the rigor. He brought the charm. She brought the precision. He was the dream. She was the plan. They made sense together. And then the scholarship came. Her scholarship. A full scholarship. To study for a master's degree in development economics at a university in Ghana. Fully funded. 1 year. A genuine, significant, world-changing opportunity. For a girl from Abaru. For a fisherman's daughter. This was the thing. The door that Madame Ehejerika had predicted. Standing open. Inviting her through. She told Tobe on a Tuesday evening. She thought he would be happy. She thought he would celebrate. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Ghana." She said, "It's 1 year. And when I come back." He said, "Nkechi, I need you here." She said, "For what?" He said, "The business. I am ready to start. I have the investor meeting next month. I need you to help me prepare. I need you to be here." She said, "Tobe, this is a scholarship. A full scholarship." He said, "I know what it is." She said, "Do you know how rare this is? Do you know what this kind of qualification will do for my career?" He said, "I know. And I am not saying it doesn't matter. I am saying I need you." She said, "Ghana is not the moon. I can help you from there. Video calls. Documents. The time difference is nothing." He looked at her. He said, "It's not the same." She said, "Tobe." He said, "Nkechi, I want to marry you. I have been planning to marry you. This year. After I get the business started. I want to marry you and build this with you. If you go to Ghana, that whole plan changes." She said, "Why does it change?" "I come back with a master's degree. We get married. The business." He said, "The investor is ready now. The window is now. If I miss this window, I don't know when the next one comes. And I cannot walk into that meeting without you having prepared the financials." He looked at her. His eyes. Not manipulative. Not cruel. Genuine. The genuine eyes of a man who needed something and was asking for it. She said, "You're asking me not to go." He said, "I'm asking you to choose us." She thought about it for 1 week. Not lightly. She thought about it the way she thought about everything, with all of herself. She wrote lists. Advantages of going. Consequences of staying. The scholarship's value. The business opportunities timeline. The marriage. What the marriage meant. What choosing it meant. She called her mother. Her mother said, "Nkechi, what does your heart say?" She said, "My heart says marry him. My head says take the scholarship." Her mother said, "Which one is going to feed your children?" She said, "Mama." Her mother said, "I'm serious. The scholarship feeds your mind. The man feeds your life. Which one are you choosing?" She said, "Can't I have both?" Her mother was quiet. Then she said, "In a fair world, yes. But you know what world this is." She turned down the scholarship. She stayed. She helped Tobe prepare for the investor meeting. She built the financial projections. She stress-tested the business model. She prepared the pitch documents with the precision that economics had given her and the care that loving him added. The investor meeting went well. The investor was a businessman from Lagos, a man named Uchenna Ogbozer. Not a huge investor, but enough. Seed capital. Enough to begin. Tobe came home from that meeting, and he held her. He held her, and he said, "We did it." She said, "You did it." He said, We. He said, "I'm going to marry you, Nkechi Asika. I'm going to marry you and build something so large that you will never regret this." She believed him. She had looked at him and believed every word. They married the following year. A church wedding in Enugu. Small by most standards. Large by theirs. Both families present. Her mother in a blue gown. His father in an ibada that he had clearly been saving for an occasion exactly like this. She wore a white dress that her mother had helped to choose. Not extravagant. Real. She walked into that church, and she felt it. The rightness of it. The particular rightness of a choice you have made with your full self. She had chosen. She had stayed. She had given up the scholarship. And standing here, with Tobe at the altar looking at her with those eyes that had always listened, she was certain. The choice had been right. The first 3 years of marriage were the building years. Hard years. Real years. Tobe's business, a logistics and distribution company called Duru, was growing. Slowly. Not the way he had imagined. Not the explosive, rapid kind of growth that happens in business fantasies. The real kind. The kind where you solve one problem and it reveals 2 more. Where you gain 1 client and lose another. Where the investor's money runs thinner than projected and you spend a month running numbers trying to decide what to cut. These were the years. Nkechi worked. She had gotten a job at a secondary school in Enugu. Economics teacher. Not what she had planned. Not what a master's degree from Ghana would have built toward. But honest work. Real work. The kind with a salary that arrived on the 27th of each month without fail. In those first 3 years, her salary was often the thing that kept the household running while the business found its footing. She did not say this. She did not announce it. She did not put the sacrifice on the table and ask for credit. She just managed. She paid what needed to be paid. She stretched what needed to stretch. She moved money between accounts with the same precision she had used on Tobe's investor pitch documents. Making things work. Every month. She also worked for the business. Not as an employee. As a wife. As a partner. Evenings and weekends. Every document that needed a second pair of eyes went through her. Every client proposal. Every contract. She reviewed them. Not because he could not. Because 2 pairs of eyes catch what 1 misses. Because the precision she brought was a real thing. Was useful. Was valuable. She was an asset to Duru that did not appear on any balance sheet. She knew this. He knew this. They did not discuss it. Because discussing it would have required putting a number on it. and putting a number on it would have made explicit a debt that both of them preferred to leave implicit. Implicit debts are the ones that collect the most interest. Year 4. Duru got a government contract. A real one. State-level distribution contract. Moving goods between government facilities in Anambra. It was not a large contract by national standards. By their standards, it was transformative. The cash flow changed. The scale changed. Tobe hired his first proper staff. A driver, an admin, then 2 more drivers, then an operations manager. The compound they had been renting became a house they could afford to consider buying. The discussion of buying a house was the first real fight they had. Not because of the house itself, because of where the money for the deposit was coming from. Tobe wanted to use money from the business. Nkechi said, "The business needs that money. The contract has payment gaps. Use my savings." He said, "Your savings?" She said, "The money I have been putting away for the past 3 years. It is enough for the deposit." He said, "Nkechi, I don't want to use your money." She said, "It is our money." He said, "I want to provide." She said, "Tobe, the business is growing. That is provision. This money sitting in the account doing nothing while the business has payment gaps is not smart management. Let me use the savings for the house. When the contract pays out, you can replenish it." He looked at her. He said, "Replenish it? You make it sound like a loan." She said, "I'm not keeping score. I'm just managing resources." He said, "I know, and I appreciate it. But sometimes I want to just be the man who provides." She said, "You are providing. You built the business. You got the contract. That is provision. I am just the logistics." He smiled. She had said it intentionally. Logistics. His word. His business. His language. He smiled. He said, "Use the savings." She used the savings. They bought the house. Year 5. Year 6. The business grew. The government contract led to another. And another. Duru developed a reputation. Reliable. Efficient. Trustworthy. These were words that clients used. These were not accidents. These were the direct product of the systems Nkechi had helped build. The document management. The contract review process. The cash flow forecasting that she had set up in year 2 when the first investor money was running out. These systems, her systems, were the invisible scaffolding of Duru reputation. Nobody knew this outside the compound. Nobody was supposed to know. She was the wife. The wife ran the home. The husband ran the business. That was the story the world was told. The true story was more complicated. The true story was that the boundary between the home and the business in the Duru household was the same kind of border that rivers have, theoretical, shifting, and ultimately irrelevant to the water's movement. Year 7. Tobe hired a new executive assistant. Her name was Kelechi Obesai. 24 years old. University of Lagos. Business administration. Bright. Energetic. Organized. Nkechi met her once. At the office. Tobe had renovated a small commercial space and called it the Duru head office. She came to drop off some documents and Kelechi was at the front. She greeted her. Kelechi greeted back. Professional. Polite. Nothing remarkable. Nkechi went home. She did not think about Kelechi, but she began to think about other things. Smaller things. The kind that, taken individually, mean nothing, but taken together, form a shape. Tobe started coming home later. Not dramatically late. Just later than usual. An hour. Sometimes 2. She asked. He said, "The business. New contract negotiations. Client meetings running over." She accepted this. Because it was plausible. Because the business was growing. Because she had seen the contracts and knew they were real. She accepted it. But she noticed. The phone. The phone that had always been on the kitchen counter when he was home. That was now in his pocket. Always in his pocket. Face down on the table. Picked up quickly when a notification came. She noticed. She said nothing. Because noticing and saying are different decisions. And saying required a certainty she did not yet have. She told herself, "You are paranoid. You are a woman who has worked hard and sacrificed, and the sacrifice has cost you something, and you are looking for a reason to be unhappy, because unhappy would explain the cost. She told herself this. She watched. The dinner party. Year 7, month 8. A client of Tobe's. A successful man from Lagos who was expanding his operations into the East. He held a dinner at a hotel. Invited business associates. Tobe and Nkechi were invited as a couple. She wore a dress she had bought 2 years earlier and rarely had occasion for. They arrived. Sat at the table. The evening was pleasant. Good food. Good conversation. And then, toward the end of the evening, she excused herself to the restroom. She came back. She stood at the entrance of the dining room for a moment before walking back to the table. Tobe was speaking to someone across the table. He was laughing. She had not heard him laugh like that in months. The laugh from the early years. The unguarded one. And he was looking at the person across the table. A woman. A young woman. Wearing a red dress. Nkechi walked back to the table. She looked at the young woman. She looked at Tobe. He saw her coming. The laugh stopped. Not dramatically. Just stopped. The way laughter stops when something changes in the room. He said, "Nkechi, come and meet." He introduced her. The young woman smiled. A professional smile. Nkechi smiled back. She sat. She was perfectly composed. She spoke when spoken to. She ate what was served. She did everything required of a wife at a business dinner. And inside, quietly, without any fanfare, a certainty that had been forming for weeks finally finished forming. She did not say anything that night. Or the next day. She waited. She went back to the documents she reviewed. She went back to the balance sheets she maintained on behalf of the business. She was still doing this in year 7. Still reviewing Duralink's contracts. Still the invisible scaffolding. Still. And in the documents, she found something. Not a love letter. Not a photograph. Something more subtle. A pattern. In the expense accounts. Dinners at restaurants she did not know. On evenings when he had told her he was in client meetings. Hotel receipts from cities they had not traveled to together. Figures that did not align with the business purposes recorded against them. She was an economics graduate. She had been managing these numbers for 7 years. She knew what legitimate business expenses looked like. These were not all legitimate. She closed the laptop. She sat at the kitchen table. She thought. How long? She thought about the laugh at the dinner. About the phone always face down. About the later evenings. She thought. How long have I been the last to know? She asked him on a Tuesday night. After dinner. After the dishes. When the house was quiet and there was nothing to hide behind. She said, "Tobe, I need to ask you something." He said, "What?" She said, "Are you faithful to me?" The pause. The pause that lasted 1 second too long. The pause that is its own answer. He said, "Nkechi." She said, "I am asking you directly. Look at me and answer directly." He looked at her. He said, "Why are you asking?" She said, "Because I reviewed the expense accounts. Because there are figures I cannot reconcile with legitimate business. Because there are evenings I cannot reconcile with client meetings." He was quiet. She said, "How long?" He said, "Nkechi." She said, "How long, Tobechukwu?" A long silence. He said, 8 months. 8 months. She sat with that number. 8 months. While she was still reviewing his contracts. Still managing the cash flow. Still teaching at the school. Still doing everything. 8 months. She said, "Who?" He said, "It doesn't matter." She said, "It matters to me." "Who?" He said the name. It was not Kelechi. It was not the woman in the red dress. It was someone she did not know. Which was almost worse. An unknown person. While she stood in the middle of everything she had built with him, someone she did not even know had been the thing he chose to invest in on the side. She said, "Is it over?" He said, "Yes." She said, "Are you sure?" He said, "Nkechi, I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But it is over. I want to fix this." She said, "I need to think." She went to the bedroom. She sat on the bed. She thought. She thought for a long time. She did not leave immediately. This is the part that people who have never been inside this kind of situation do not understand. You do not leave immediately, because leaving is a decision that requires a settled mind. And a settled mind is not available the night you find out. She stayed. She told her mother. Her mother came. She sat with her mother in the kitchen. She told her everything. Not just the affair. Everything. The scholarship. The savings. The invisible work. The expense accounts. 8 months. Her mother listened. She did not interrupt. When Nkechi finished, her mother was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "How much of you is still in this marriage?" Nkechi said, "What?" Her mother said, "Not how much do you love him. Not how much have you given. How much of Nkechi is still here? The one who wanted to go to Ghana. The one who had the scholarship. How much of her is still inside you?" Nkechi said, "I don't know." Her mother said, "Find her. Before you decide anything else. Find her first." She found a therapist. This was not a typical step for a woman in her community. Not common. Not celebrated. But she had read enough to know that what she needed was not her mother's advice, not her friend's outrage, not her church's counsel. She needed someone who would help her hear herself think. She found a woman in Enugu who had a quiet office and a direct manner and no stake in what Nkechi decided. She went every week for 3 months. She talked. She talked about the scholarship, about the choice she had made at 22, about whether it had been the right choice. Not in the context of the affair, in the context of herself. Who had she been before Tobe? Who was she now? What had she wanted? What had she built? What did she still want? The therapist did not tell her to leave. She did not tell her to stay. She helped her ask the questions that mattered. One of those questions was the one that changed everything. The therapist said, "Nkechi, outside of this marriage, outside of Duru, outside of being a wife and a helper and a reviewer of documents, what do you want for yourself?" And Nkechi sat with that question. For the first time in 7 years. What do you want for yourself? Not for him. Not for us. For yourself. She went home. She sat in the house she had bought with her savings. She looked at it. The house that they lived in. The furniture. The pictures on the wall. The small details that accumulated over years to become the texture of a life. She thought about what she had given. Not bitterly. Honestly. She thought about the scholarship. About what that year in Ghana might have built. About the career trajectory. About where she might be now if she had chosen differently at 22. Not to compare. Not to blame. To understand. To understand what she had invested. And to decide whether the investment had been in the right place. She thought about Tobe. About the man who had listened. Who had adjusted. Who had valued her precision. Who had used it. Who had used her. Not intentionally. Not maliciously. But used. The way people use good things that are freely available. Without fully accounting for the cost. She asked him to sit with her. She said, "I have been thinking for 3 months. I want to say some things." He sat. He looked at her with the face of a man bracing himself. She said, "I turned down a scholarship for you. I don't know if you understood at the time what that meant. What I was giving up." He said, "I knew." She said, "Let me finish." He closed his mouth. She said, "I gave up the scholarship. I worked for this family while the business grew. I managed the cash flows. I reviewed the contracts. I did the financial projections. I built the systems that your business runs on. I did all of that while also working a full-time job. For 7 years." He said, "I know that." She said, "Do you? Do you actually know it? Or do you know it the way people know something they take for granted? In theory, but not in practice?" He said, "Nkechi, I value everything you." She said, "You had an affair." The words were flat. Just facts. He looked down. She said, "A man who values what I gave him does not have an affair. A man who values his wife does not spend 8 months with another woman while that wife is still reviewing his expense accounts." He said, "I know." She said, "The business is doing well now. Duru is successful. It is going to become very successful. I have seen the projections. I know the pipeline. I know what this company is worth." He looked at her. She said, "I want to talk about what that means for me." He said, "What are you saying?" She said, I am saying that I am a part of this business. Whether or not my name is on the letterhead, whether or not I have a title, whether or not I am officially recognized, I am a part of it. And going forward, that needs to be formalized. He said, what do you want? She said, I want my name on the business. As a co-founder. Recognized. Legal. Formal. He said, you want to be on the company documents. She said, I want to be on the company documents. I want my contribution acknowledged in writing. I want the legal protection that comes with that. He looked at her. He said, you are talking about protecting yourself. In case. She said, in case of many things. Yes. A long silence. He said, Nkechi, I don't want us to become adversaries. She said, then don't let us become adversaries. Give me what is fair. What was always fair. And then let us see if we can build something real from here. He said, and the marriage? She said, we will see about the marriage. But the business comes first. The business I help build cannot be the thing that gets left in the uncertainty while we figure out the rest. He looked at his wife. He looked at her for a long time. And in that look was something new. Or something returned. The quality of actually seeing someone. Really seeing them. Not as the woman who reviewed the documents. Not as the logistics of his household. But as the person. The economic scholarship girl from Agbaru who had given 7 years to something she had built with him. He said, I'll call the lawyer tomorrow. But this is where the story turns. Because what happened next was not what she expected. And not what he expected. And not what anyone who had been watching this story unfold from a distance could have predicted. 2 weeks after that conversation, the Lagos investor called. Not Uchenna Ogbozer, the first investor. A new one. A much larger one. A man named Emeka Adelik. Not the Emeka of common names. This Emeka was a Lagos-based entrepreneur who had built and sold 3 businesses. Who had read about Duru in a business journal article that had profiled the company's growth in the Southeast. Who wanted to talk about acquisition. Not a small acquisition. A significant one. A number that, when Tobe called Nkechi and said it, made her sit down. He said, Nkechi, they want to buy 60% of Duru. She said, at what valuation? He told her. She sat down. She said, Tobe. He said, I know. She said, that's. He said, I know. They were both quiet for a moment. Then she said, we need to look at this very carefully. 60% is control. We need to understand what that means for the remaining 40. What our roles would be. What the exit terms look like. He said, will you come to the meeting? She said, of course I'm coming to the meeting. The meeting was in Lagos. They flew together. Sat in the hotel the night before going over the documents she had prepared. Not like a married couple. Like partners. Like business partners who happened to also be navigating a personal crisis that was temporarily set aside in service of the more urgent thing. She prepared for that meeting the way she prepared for everything. Completely. She knew their numbers better than any document showed. She knew the value. She knew the negotiating positions. She had modeled 4 different scenarios for what the deal could look like depending on valuation and control terms. She walked into that meeting with Tobe and sat down at the table. Emeka Adelik was a large man. Not in a threatening way. In the way of someone who occupies space naturally. He had 2 advisors with him. He looked at Tobe. He looked at Nkechi. He said, are you both principals of Duru? Tobe said, I founded the company. Nkechi said, at the same time, yes. They looked at each other. A fraction of a second. A full conversation in that fraction of a second. She said, we are both principals. I am a co-founder. Emeka looked at her. He said, I wasn't aware the company had 2 founders. Nkechi said, the business was built on 2 people's work from the beginning. The formalization is recent, but the reality is not. Emeka studied her. He said, who built the financial systems? She said, I did. He said, the contract management process? She said, also me. He looked at Tobe. He said, is that accurate? Tobe said, after a moment, yes. That is accurate. Emeka nodded. He said, "Then I need to talk to both of you." The negotiation took 4 days. 4 days in Lagos. In a conference room at the investor's office. Going through every line, every term, every implication. Nkechi was the one who caught the clause in Section 11 that would have given Adelike's company the right to unilaterally restructure the remaining 40% in year 3. She caught it. She flagged it. She explained it to Tobe in terms clear enough that he understood the danger. They pushed back on the clause. Adelike's team pushed back. They negotiated. They found a compromise. The compromise protected them. By the end of the 4 days, when the term sheet was agreed, and they were sitting in the hotel restaurant having the kind of quiet meal that comes after an intense period of work, Tobe looked at her. He said, "You saved us in there." She said, "I protected our interests. That is what I have always done." He said, "I know." She said, "I know you know." He said, "Nkechi, what are we doing?" She said, "Right now? We are about to become significantly financially secure." He said, "That's not what I mean." She said, "I know what you mean." She looked at her water glass. She said, "I don't know yet. I know what I gave this marriage. I know what it gave back. I know what it took from me. And I am still in the process of understanding whether what we have is worth rebuilding or whether what we have is worth separating with dignity." He said, "I love you." She said, "I believe that." He said, "But it's not enough, is it?" She said, "It was always enough. The love was never the problem." He said, "Then what?" She said, "The respect. The respect was not always there. Not the kind that says, what you give has value. Not the kind that says, your time and your sacrifice and your career and your scholarship, those things have worth. I need to know that if we continue as people who see each other, not just love each other. See each other." He said, "I see you now." She said, "I know. It took a lot for you to see me. I need to know it won't take that much again." He said nothing. He looked at his plate. He said, "I am sorry, Nkechi, for the affair, for the 8 months, for the 18 months before that where I could see you fading and I told myself you were fine because it was easier than looking at what was happening." She looked up. She said, "You saw me fading." He said, "Yes." She said, "And you said nothing." He said, "No." She said, "Why?" He said, "Because looking at it would have required admitting that I had been taking too much and giving too little. And I was not ready to admit that." She sat with that. She said, "Thank you for admitting it now." He said, "It's too late." She said, "I don't know yet." When the acquisition was finalized, 3 months after the Lagos meeting, it was in both their names. Tobe and Nkechi Duru, co-founders. Duru Link. They're 40%. Protected. The amount it represented in real, liquid, bankable money was the kind of number that changes a family's story. Not just their generation. The next one. And the one after. She stood in the lawyer's office on the day of signing. She watched her name go onto the document. Her name. Nkechi Asika Duru. On the company papers. Legal. Formal. Real. She had been real before this. The reality had always been there. But now the paper confirmed it. Now the world had a record. She held the pen. She signed. Her mother came to Enugu when she heard. She sat in the kitchen. She looked at her daughter. She said, "Are you staying with him?" Nkechi said, "I haven't decided." Her mother said, "What is left to decide?" Nkechi said, "Whether what we have can be real from here. Whether the thing that broke is fixable." Her mother said, "Do you want to fix it?" A long pause. Nkechi said, "I want to know if I want to fix it." "That's different." Her mother said, "That's honest." Nkechi said, "The scholarship, Mama." Her mother said, "What about it?" She said, "I think about it sometimes. What I might have done. Where I might be." Her mother said, "You know what I know?" She said, "What?" Her mother said, "You would have gone to Ghana. You would have gotten the degree. And you would have come back and built something. And that something would have been good. But it would not have been this." She looked at her daughter. She said, "Not because this is better, but because you are here now. This is what you built. And it is real. It is yours. All of it, Nkechi said, even with the cost. Her mother said, everything costs. The question is whether what you have is worth the cost. Not what someone else told you it was worth. Not what he told you it was worth. What you actually think. Nkechi said, what do I actually think? Her mother said, I think that is the question only you can answer. She answered it in her own time. Over months. She did not rush. She was not performing patience. She was genuinely processing. She continued the therapy. She spoke honestly. She sat with the anger. She allowed herself the full experience of the grief of what she had lost. Not the marriage, the version of herself she had put aside. And somewhere in that process, she made a decision. Not about him. About herself first. She enrolled. Part-time. A master's program. Not in Ghana. Not the same program. But a real one. At a university in Nigeria. Development economics. 8 years late. Still real. She told Tobe. He said, how will you manage with? She said, I will manage. He said, can I help? She said, yes. You can manage the Duru link documents yourself from now on. I am no longer available for that on evenings and weekends. He said, okay. He hired someone. A real financial analyst. With a salary. With a job description. With all the formality that the role had always deserved. She enrolled. She went back to school. 8 years later. With a master's program on her horizon and her name on a company and a marriage that was not yet decided. She went. The marriage. She did not decide quickly. She did not decide from the drama. She did not decide from the wound or the anger or the financial situation. She decided from a conversation. One evening, 9 months after the affair came out, she and Tobe were at the kitchen table. Not fighting. Not performing reconciliation. Just sitting. The way they had sat in the early years before the fighting and the performing. Just two people at a table. He said, I want to tell you something. She said, okay. He said, when I had the affair, it was not because I stopped loving you. It was because he stopped. It was because I was afraid. She said, of what? He said, of what you were becoming. She looked at him. He said, not in a bad way. I mean, I could see that you were growing beyond me. Your mind, your ability, the way you saw things. And instead of being proud of that, I was afraid that if you ever stopped and looked at what you had given up for me, you would see clearly how the exchange was unfair. She said, and so you had an affair. He said, I know that makes no sense. She said, it makes a kind of terrible sense. He looked at her. She said, you could not face what you owed me. So you distanced yourself. You found somewhere else to put your attention so you wouldn't have to sit with the discomfort of what you had taken. He said, yes. She said, and you think understanding that excuses it. He said, no, nothing excuses it. I am explaining it. Those are different. She sat with this. She sat with this for a long time. She said, Tobe, I gave up the scholarship because I loved you, not because you asked me to. I am not going to lie and pretend the choice was made under duress. I made it freely. He said, Nkechi. She said, but the choice I made freely was paid for twice. Once when I made it. And once again when you decided to be afraid of me instead of proud of me. He said, I know. She said, do you know what I need from you if this marriage continues? He said, what? She said, I need you to be proud of me. Without needing me to be smaller for you to be comfortable. I am not going to be smaller. I have been smaller for 7 years, and it almost disappeared me. I am not doing that again. He said, I don't want you smaller. She said, then show me that. Not in words. In how you live. In the next year. The next 5 years. Show me. He said, I will. She said, I know. She looked at him. She said, I am not ready to say we are fixed. But I am willing to see. He said, that's enough. That is more than enough. She finished the master's program in 2 years. She did it while teaching, while the Duralink acquisition finalized, while navigating a marriage that was being rebuilt one honest conversation at a time. She graduated on a Saturday in June. Her mother came. Her father came. Old and slower now, but there. The fisherman from Abaru. In a suit that was too large for his smaller frame. Eyes wet before she even crossed the stage. Tobe came. He sat in the audience, and he watched his wife walk across that stage. He watched her accept the certificate. He watched her smile. Not the full smile of someone who is performing joy. A quieter one. The smile of someone receiving something that was overdue. Something earned twice. Once when she was 22 and once now, at 30, as a different and harder one person. He watched. And she saw him watching. And in his face she saw it. The thing she had told him she needed. Pride. Not complicated. Not conditional. Not afraid. Just pride. After the ceremony, her father held her. He held her the way old men hold their children. With all of himself. He said, into her hair, "My daughter." She said, "Papa." He said, "I told your mother 25 years ago." I said, "Watch Nkechi. That one is going to be something." She said, "Papa." He said, "You took longer than you should have. But you got there." She pulled back. She looked at him. He said, "No regrets. You hear me? Whatever road you took to get here. No regrets. The destination is yours." And she did not regret. Not because the choices had been perfect. Not because the path had been straight. But because regret is a room you lock yourself in. And she had spent too long in locked rooms. She was done with locked rooms. She was done with small spaces. She was done with the version of herself that existed to hold other people's plans together. Not because helping was wrong. Because disappearing in the helping was. She was Nkechi Asika Duru, economics graduate, master's holder, Duru co-founder, teacher, wife on her own terms, daughter of a fisherman who had watched her from the beginning. She was all of these things. And she was finally, taking up all the space they added up to. 3 years after the acquisition, Duru was acquired further. A full sale. Complete. The number was life-changing. Not just for one generation. She called her mother when the transfer hit the account. She said, "Mama." Her mother said, "Tell me." She said the number. Her mother was quiet. Then she said, "Nkechi, do you remember that scholarship?" She said, "Every day, Mama." Her mother said, "What do you think now? When you look at everything you have built, when you look at where you are standing, what do you think?" Nkechi was quiet for a long time. She thought about a 22-year-old girl in a Nugu, about a letter in her hand, about a choice, about 7 years of invisible work, about documents and cash flows and evenings at the kitchen table, about 8 months, about a lawyer's office in Lagos, about a stage in June and a certificate and a father's wet eyes, about a marriage that had broken and was being rebuilt. Not the same shape, a new shape, better in some ways, harder in others, real in all of them. She thought about all of this, and she said, "I think the scholarship would have taken me somewhere. I think this path took me somewhere else. And I think where I am now is mine in a way that nothing that comes easily can be." Her mother said, "You are a deep woman." She said, "You made me, Mama." Her mother laughed. And she laughed. And the laughter was real. And it was enough. This is the thing about sacrifice. It is not a payment. It is not a down payment on a debt that someone owes you. It is not a transaction. It is a choice. And choices have consequences. Some of those consequences are beautiful. Some are painful. Most are both. The woman who gives up her scholarship to stay with a man who is worth staying with. She makes a gift. Not a loan. Not a trade. A gift. And gifts, when given to the right person, come back in ways the giver did not plan for. But gifts given to a person who has not yet learned how to receive them. Gifts given to a man who is afraid of the thing he is being given. Those gifts can be mishandled, can be taken for granted, can be used without being honored. And the woman who gave the gift must then make a second choice. A harder one. Do I walk away? Or do I stay? Do I protect what remains? Or do I burn it all down? There is no correct answer. Every woman has to find her own. But the answer that Nkechi found was this. Do not make the choice from the wound. Make it from the whole person. The person before the wound. The girl with the scholarship letter. The sharp one. The precise one. The one who analyzed instead of argued. Make the choice from her. And whatever you decide, stay or go. Make sure your name is on the building. You just sat with Nkechi. You sat with her at that fabric stall when the woman's face changed. You sat with her at the kitchen table when she asked the question she already knew the answer to. You sat with her in the lawyer's office in Lagos when she made them see her. When she put her name on the building. When she walked across that graduation stage 10 years after the scholarship she gave away. And if this story did something to you, if it reached into the place where your own sacrifices live, the ones nobody sees, the ones that never got acknowledged, the ones you made for someone who was afraid of how much you were worth, then you already know this channel belongs to you. Because this is what we do here. We tell the stories of the women who gave, and the men who took, and the long, hard, sacred road back to yourself. We tell the stories your grandmother lived but never spoke, the ones your mother swallowed, the ones that live in the space between what was sacrificed and what was received. These stories need telling, and they need people who are willing to sit with them all the way to the end. You just did that. So subscribe right now, because we have more. We have the women who stayed and found their way back. We have the women who left and found their way forward. We have the men who woke up too late and the ones who woke up just in time. We have the stories that live in the bones of this continent, that our storytellers have been carrying since before the roads. Subscribe. Hit like if Nkechi's journey touched something real in you. And drop in the comments, right now, before you scroll, the most important thing you have ever given up for someone else. Not to be bitter about it. To name it, because naming it is the first step to understanding what it was worth. Tell us where you are watching from. Tell us what you gave. We are listening. This community is built on the truth that no sacrifice is invisible here. Everyone is seen. Everyone is counted. Subscribe. Come back. We will be here, naming the things that should have been named a long time ago.